Earlier on this year, Realme released a standalone Realme GT. If the name doesn't give it away already, Realme designed the phone to look much like a racing car. Realme have just now introduced two new additions to the family. Today we'll be focusing on the top of the line version, known simply as the Realme GT Master Explorer Edition, which sets aside the racing car themed design in favor of a luxurious vegan leather suitcase finish. The company has now replaced the Snapdragon 888 chipset for a slightly less performing CPU, the Snapdragon 870, in order to add an aluminum frame, a curved display, and a flagship-worthy IMX766 main camera sensor, all while keeping the device at the same great price. Is the performance sacrifice worth it for an improved design, build, display, and camera boost? Let's find out in my extremely detailed, full review of the Realme GT Master Explorer Edition. The GT Master Explorer Edition comes in a Voyager Grey or Voyager Apricot, being the vegan leather finish. You can also pick them up in glass finishes as well, though I especially like this grey finished leather back. We get a 4500 mAh battery under the hood alongside a 65 watt super dart wired charger inside the box. Unfortunately, no wireless charging, and we do have Gorilla Glass 5 front, vegan leather or glass back, and of course an aluminum frame wrapping around it. The back looks fantastic, though I'm pretty sure you're going to be getting some chafes in the near future. The included case is silicon, not leather, just letting you guys know. We do have a power button on the right hand side, a split volume rocker on the left hand side, and we have a dual SIM 5G standby tray. There is a water resistant seal, very strange, USB 2.0 charging port, as well as two dual speakers paired with Dolby Atmos. The camera bump at the back isn't that big, pretty much on par with the OnePlus 9 Pro, and a lot smaller than the likes of other smartphones around, which means that the camera wobble on a flat surface is very manageable, pretty minimal if you ask me. In terms of the back designs, I actually think the Realme GT Master Explorer Edition stands out a hell of a lot more than the rest of these expensive devices, and it weighs just 183.5 grams, and it's just 8 millimeters thick, depending on the version that you get. The back design looks absolutely phenomenal, but what about the display? Well, we are welcome to a 6.55 inch Super AMOLED 20:9 aspect ratio curved display. It is Full HD plus. It has a DCI-P3 rating of 100% with HDR10 plus, 1100 nits max brightness, 120 Hz refresh rates, and 480 Hz touch sampling rates. It looks darn fancy even when up close. Unfortunately, no QHD plus over here, and no 1 billion colors this time around, with a slightly smaller panel when compared to the competitors, though the curves on the side are just as minimal as we've seen on recent flagship smartphones. The colors do certainly pop even when up close, and the color accuracy is on par with even more expensive smartphones out there, and the white balance is pretty great too. We also have an incredible 1100 nits peak brightness, which is almost right up there with the best of the best, and certainly better and higher than more flagship budget-friendly smartphones around. Of course, we do have the camera punch hole over there. Like I mentioned, no WQHD plus as we see on true flagship smartphones. And we do have 120 Hz refresh rates, though not 144 Hz as we've seen on other smartphones around. 120 Hz for me is still pretty much a sweet spot. Even 90 would have been okay in my books. It looks phenomenal. It feels so darn smooth. And just to let you guys know, yes, I did record this in slow motion. The biggest drawback of this 120 Hz panel is the fact that it doesn't have an adaptive refresh rate. It can only automatically detect whether you're using a 60 or 120 Hz app. We can, of course, increase the brightness, change the eye comfort level with a warmer or cooler screen. We can also change the screen color modes, though not as intense as we've seen on other smartphones. We also have image enhancers, though they are limited to only certain apps here in China. And of course, we do have dark mode over here, which gives you nice deep blacks, and you can set it to turn on whenever you'd like automatically. We do have an enhanced, medium, and gentle option, something that I wish we would see on more phones. Third-party apps, some of them do work with it. First-party apps, of course, all of them work with dark mode, though the notification tray is pretty much gray, not really black, even when you're using the enhanced version. We do have an always-on display here, and just like we see in Oppo's Color OS, we can create custom patterns options, which are just a joy to do. Yes, it may seem pretty gimmicky, but once you get it done, you really do feel like a bit of an artist every time you go ahead to unlock your device. It looks fantastic, and there are a couple options that you can customize with it, including the date and time, so on and so forth. Of course, all your notifications as well, but I'm a simple guy. I prefer the more simplified always on displays. We do have an optical in-display fingerprint sensor, and it's pretty much on par with the OnePlus 9 Pro and the Oppo Find X3 Pro, since they use the same one. It's a tad faster than the ZTE Accent 30 Ultra, and it is almost on par with the Red Magic 6R now and then. We do have 2D face unlock. It utilizes the selfie camera, and when comparing it to other devices using the same 2D face unlock, it's pretty much once again on par with that from Oppo and from OnePlus, because they're also made by the same company, that being BBK Electronics, and the Red Magic is a tad quicker this time compared to the Realme device. Of course, that selfie cam can be used for more than just unlocking your phone. We do have a 32 megapixel selfie snapper, and it looks great even when in portrait mode. This is TechNeck recording a 1080p 30fps selfie video on the brand new Realme GT Master Explorer Edition. It is completely capped at 30fps and 1080p when recording using the selfie cam. Taking selfies at night don't come out too great even when using the dedicated night mode feature. The flash looks way too overblown. For the back cams, we do have a 14mm ultra wide sensor, which is 16 megapixels. We also have a 24mm main sensor, which is the 50 megapixel Sony IMX766 sensor, and we have a 2 megapixel macro sensor. Unfortunately, no telephoto this time around. The ultra wide pics actually come out very oversaturated. The main 50 megapixel looks great. Switching to AI and using 4:1 pixel binning to get a 12.5 megapixel shot looks decent. We have zoom, but only digital. It can go up to 20 times zoom. Anything past, I would say 5 times zoom isn't the best, but 10 times is still bearable. 20 is kind of unusable if you ask me. And we do have the macro sensor, of course, that 2 megapixel useless thing at the back. If you do use it, it comes out just fine. And we can also use portrait mode, but once again, no telephoto over here, so it's just using digital AI, which still doesn't look too bad. We have 1080p at 30fps ultra wide, but 30fps is the max FPS that we can get with ultra wide, and 1080p is the max resolution that we can use when using ultra wide. We do have 4K 60fps, which is the max. There is no 8K this time around. This is the main sensor, of course, with optical image stabilization. Once again, 1080p 60fps using the main camera looks pretty decent. Not as detailed as 4K as you would expect, but nice and smooth over here too. We also have an option to use 1080p at 30fps using AI highlight video, but it is capped at 30fps and 1080p. It really does make colors pop, but once again, a little oversaturated for my liking. We do also have a bokeh video effect mode, which keeps edge detection on point. If you ask me, it looks pretty decent, but once again, capped at 1080p 30fps. We do have ultra steady, and yes, I am swaying when it is on, and I'm swaying when max is on, but it just doesn't show the sway because it is so darn good. We do have 1080p at 24 frames per second, very strange ultra wide when recording at night. It tends to drop down the frames in order to brighten up the video. 4K 60fps doesn't drop the frames over there. Same thing, doesn't drop the frames with 1080p. Doesn't look too bad. The nice thing though is that we do have AI highlight video, which really does make a difference at night, making things a lot more bright, but it does take away in terms of image quality. Talking about image quality, ultra wide at night doesn't look the best, but the night mode feature makes a huge difference. Doesn't make as much of a difference with the bin 12.5 megapixel main shot, but it still makes a bit of a difference, keeping the detail intact. And when zooming in, night mode on completely washes out the detail, but does pop out all the colors. Same thing with 5 times digital zoom, and of course 10 times as well. Things look a little too dull when night mode is off, and it really does make it pop with night mode on, but you lose a lot of quality. We have 20 times zoom max, but unfortunately no night mode option for that. We do have Realme UI 2.0 skinned over Android 11. It is literally the exact same if you are used to an Oppo phone running ColorOS 11. The software is nice, clean, easy to use, and yes, we do have fully fledged Google services on here, so no need to worry about that. With all the split screen and all that jazz that you've come to know and love from Oppo's ColorOS software packed in to Realme UI 2.0 with mini window, so on and so forth. We also have smart sidebar, which we've seen in Oppo's software, which is a nifty little multitasking gesture tool pulled in from the side. And yes, the holy grail personalization options where we can change themes as well as wallpapers. We can also go into our gallery and we can customize a wallpaper, but it only really changes the colors, keeps the shapes the same for all wallpapers you try to do this with. We also can customize our always on display, of course, and all the system icons the way that you'd like, as well as your fingerprint animation and your colors of your phone, as well as your text, and it just goes on. And your notification drawer, of course, you can change the shapes and icons of that. And of course, you can also have a edge lighting wrapping around your phone when you get a notification. The haptics are very much on point with the best phones around. And in terms of speakers, let's test the dual speakers out with Dolby Atmos against two other devices. When it comes to gaming, we do have the same game space software that we see in Oppo devices with low power mode, balance mode, and pro gamer mode. In Oppo, we usually see something called competitor mode. It is nice and simple. There are a couple things that you can do, but it is limited to only certain games such as the 4D vibration, which yes, is available over here. And jumping into Genshin Impact over here to showcase the on-display menu that you can pull in from the side. It looks pretty decent. It shows your FPS over there. It is not always on, and you can change things like your touch optimization and go into game focus mode. There's not too much about it, but it's a nice nifty thing. If you want it, you don't have to have it enabled. Going into our first game here, Genshin Impact, with the highest possible graphics settings as well as the max FPS. The game is capped at 60 FPS, so no phone can go above 60 FPS no matter the refresh rate of the panel, and we're getting between 41 and 52 FPS on the Snapdragon 870 powered Realme GT Master Explorer Edition, which isn't too bad. If you know anything about this game, you know how graphic demanding it is. It is literally the benchmark for all gaming smartphones. Going into our next game over here, PUBG Mobile, with HDR graphics and extreme FPS. Unfortunately, we don't have a 90 FPS option on smooth graphics, even when trying to use a tool to get it there. It's not available on the phone yet. I'm sure it will come later on, though we are getting a rock steady 60 FPS, and we're also getting 60 FPS in Bullet Force, nice and stable here, though the game has an unlimited frame rate cap, so the Realme should be hitting 120 FPS, but it is not. Hopefully this gets changed with a future software update of the phone. And now we have Dead Trigger 2, another game that has no FPS cap, though it is not quite hitting 120 FPS at high graphics settings over here. We're sitting between 83 and 101 FPS. At least that game is supported with the Realme GT Master Explorer Edition to do a higher frame rate, unlike Real Racing 3 over here, which is once again capped at 60, even though it is an uncapped game. Moving on to benchmarks now. Super excited for this one. Thanks to that Snapdragon 870 processing chip. We do have 8 gigs of RAM, though you can use RAM expansion to use the ROM of the phone to get an extra 5 gigs, bringing it up to 13 gigs, which is pretty impressive. Of course, we are going to be using the 88% battery as a marker at the start. We'll compare it at the end and get a milliamp hour per minute reading, as well as measure the temperature at the start of the test and the end of the test. We're running through AnTuTu version 9 over here, Geekbench version 5, and then last but not least, we're going into 3D Mark Wildlife version 2.2. Getting to battery drain results, the phone drained by 9% at a rate of 25.3 milliamp hours per minute, and the temperature is a bit hotter as well, adding 22.1 degrees in Celsius. When it comes to AnTuTu version 9, it is right up there just underneath the Snapdragon 888 average, with the regular Realme Master Edition, which is paired with a Snapdragon 778G chipset, way down there at the bottom. When it comes to Geekbench version 5, it actually scored pretty decently in the single core segment with 1019 points, but the multi-core is even worse than the standard Realme Master Edition, the vanilla edition that is running a subpar 778G chipset, which had a higher multi-core score, which is strange to say the least. Another bit of a mixed bag over here with 3D Mark Wildlife, it actually scored worse than the average Snapdragon 870 run powered smartphone on my channel, which usually gets about 29.7 FPS. This got 25.6, which is actually closer than last year's Snapdragon 865 Plus, but you've got to bear in mind that the 870 is pretty much an overclocked version of the vanilla Snapdragon 865. Once again, a hell of a lot better than the regular Realme Master Edition at the bottom of the line here. The Realme GT Master Explorer Edition is certainly a mastercraft designed smartphone thanks to its gorgeous vegan leather suitcase designed finish. Needless to say, the design has improved by a landslide. The camera performance has also been dramatically boosted thanks to the flagship level Sony IMX766 sensor. However, I am slightly disappointed in the lack of a telephoto lens, which we still saw back in the days of the Realme X2 Pro. After unlocking the device with its snappy under-display fingerprint sensor, we are welcomed to a bright and vibrant curved AMOLED display, which makes the clean Realme UI 2.0 software skin truly stand out, and the massive customization options are certainly the cherry on top. The gaming software is simple and easy to use, and when paired with the silky smooth 120Hz refresh rate, Snapdragon 870 chipset, LPDDR5 RAM, and UFS 3.1 storage, games like an absolute champion most of the time. However, the Master Explorer Edition is not alone in the race for best overall smartphone of 2021. The OnePlus 9 Pro and Oppo Find X3 Pro both have QHD displays, improved camera systems with telephoto sensors, and an IP68 water and dust certification, but they both cost a hell of a lot more money than the GT Master Explorer Edition. And while the ZTE Accent 30 Ultra also has a better camera setup, and the Red Magic 6R actually has physical gaming triggers, neither of them can match up to just how much bang for buck you get with the Realme GT Master Explorer Edition. And that is why I am happy to say that yes, the improved design, build quality, display, and main camera sensor far outweigh the fact that the Realme GT Master Explorer Edition makes use of a Snapdragon 870 instead of an 888 chipset, which leads me to think that this may very well be the best all-round smartphone of the year thus far.